Washington Commanders Cam Sims and J.D. McKissic met with the media. Danny Johnson is rejoining the squad, and Efe Obada comes over from the Buffalo Bills to rejoin Ron Rivera. Speaking of coach, he was busy out of state this week. We'll talk about the rumors and rumblings from Ohio State's Pro Day, and our very own Chris Russell brings us his interview with Commanders offensive lineman Cornelius Lucas on a jam-packed episode of the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms. And we thank you, of course, for making us your first listen of the day or your first view of the day if you're joining us over on YouTube. I'm David Harrison, covering your Commanders for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, and my co-host, Chris Russell, the Rooster, one half of the Russell and Medhurst show on the Team 980. Find Chris and Pete there Monday through Friday from 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern or anytime, along with this show on the Audacy app. When we're not there or here, we're on Twitter at dharrison82, at russellmania621, and at Locked On Commanders. Cam Sims and J.D. McKissic have rejoined the squad, coming back to Washington on new contracts, Chris, and they met with the media recently. Since the last time we talked, they met with the media and had some interesting things to say.
Yeah, David, when these guys meet and after they come back to the organization, the media rightfully has questions like, hey, why did you want to come back here? Especially with J.D. McKissic, as controversial as that went down with Buffalo and all that stuff. It was interesting. J.D. McKissic was asked about like what the difference was and what brought him here. And he said, Washington is home. Yeah. And he said he had unfinished business, and he thought this was a playoff team when they were 5-6, and he went out for the year, that Monday Night Football win against Seattle, and he never played again. They got to 6-6 quickly the next Sunday, and then it all fell apart again. When he says that to you, when we talk about when there's so much frustration in the fan base that this isn't a place that people want to come to, this isn't a place that people want to play. But when J.D. McKissic says that, does that mean anything extra to you?
It does, because the perception from the outside and the reality inside are totally different, right? And we've talked about this at differing points during last regular season, that the extra challenge of being a coach within the Washington Commanders organization, outside of just being a normal NFL coach around the league, is going to be helping to prevent the outside noise from infiltrating the locker room and impacting the way that they do business there. Like it doesn't matter what's happening with Dan Snyder, Tanya Snyder, FedEx, Nike, Anheuser-Busch. Like none of that matters on the football field. Like between the sides, the lines, none of that has an influence over what happens on the field. The only thing that influences that is what the coaches do, what the players do, the personnel, the support staff, all that. That's what matters. So if you're inside that building, that's where you have to keep your focus. And what this tells me is that, at least from J.D. McKissic's point of view, outweighing other, potential influences in his decision on where he was going to play football next, they're doing a good enough job. And again, that's from J.D. McKissic's point of view, which is obviously valid. I'm just saying that because it doesn't necessarily copy paste every single player. But from J.D. McKissic's point of view, basically the way I'm going to put it is it's not that bad being inside the Washington Commanders locker room on the roster, or else he would have taken the first opportunity he could. So Cam Sims probably would have taken the first opportunity he could to bounce and to leave. And I think what this contrast is when you look at Brandon Scherf's situation, right, and the whole contract negotiations between him and the franchise, over the past few years, and all those things, and him leaving for a deal that I think we both agree with is not as much as money as we really expected him to go out there and get. It kind of shows that he was ready to move on. This kind of shows maybe it wasn't he was ready to move on because of the culture and atmosphere, because of all the white noise. Maybe it was just a relationship that had gone sour to the point where it was just healthier for both sides to move, which that's not necessarily a damning note on a franchise. That happens all over the league. The New England Patriots, Green Bay Packers have had players that fall into that situation. So that's where I draw a little bit of plus. It kind of shows us a little bit that at least the players and the people executing football operations aren't necessarily bogged down by all this other noise.
All right. Cam Sims also talked to the media. He said, Carson Wentz, hey, that new quarterback, one guy, QB1, he likes to throw to big receivers. And the proof is in the pudding. Michael Pittman, right, in Indianapolis had a career year. And as well, Alshon Jeffrey before that in Philadelphia. You buy that maybe, just maybe, Cam Sims might be on the verge of a breakout?
I don't know about a breakout season. I mean, Terry McLaurin is obviously still number one. Carson Wentz also likes throwing to tight ends, which is why Zach Ertz had some success with him and why people thought that maybe Zach would come to Washington. Logan Thomas obviously is going to appreciate that. John Bates and whoever they may add in free agency or through the draft. He's also got some good receiving running backs that are a part of it. So, I mean, Cam Sims, I'm not saying he's wrong. Carson obviously will blend with who he likes to blend with, connect with who he wants to connect with. But at the end of the day, we still have to see if Washington brings anybody else in from a free agency standpoint after the first couple of waves of free agency go, if they bring somebody in after the draft. I mean, there's always kind of another phase of free agency after the draft where people, some players get waived. I mean, the most historic, not historic, but the most standout moment I can think of is Keyshawn Johnson when the Carolina Panthers drafted a wide receiver, and he's ranting and raving about how they just got him a new teammate. Turns out they were actually replacing him because he ends up a free agent very quickly after that. So there's always that phase of free agency. So, I mean, Cam Sims, absolutely go out there and it's smart to go out and put out in the public air when a lot of people are kind of talking down about your quarterback that, hey, I'm looking forward to it, but he's still got to prove himself and climb up the ladder a little bit more.
All right. The organization also signed pass rusher Efe Obada, who was with Ron in Carolina a couple of years ago as an international pathway player. Also spent last year in Buffalo, 11 career sacks. I think it's nine and a half over the last 2 years. We'll talk more about him next week. And also the team re-signed Danny Johnson. And that's really important because he could be the starting slot corner. All right. This is the Locked On Commanders podcast along with David Harrison. I'm Chris Russell. Coming up next, we'll hear from Cornelius Lucas, who re-signed with the organization officially on Thursday.
Yeah, I'm going to take segment 2 off because Chris is bringing you his conversation with Washington Commanders offensive lineman Cornelius Lucas. And while he does that, I'll be looking up the latest odds on college basketball tournament action because it is that time of year again. In college basketball's tournament is upon us. And for all your latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Commanders podcast, along with David Harrison. I'm Chris Russell. Thanks for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and view each and every day. Make sure you follow Locked On NFL, Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. So as we mentioned, Washington been busy re-signing a few of their own. Danny Johnson and Cornelius Lucas signing back on a 2-year deal. And I had a chance to catch up with him earlier on Thursday and had a little chat on why he decided to come back to the Washington Commanders. All right, the Washington Commanders continue to add back to their 2022 roster, and a big part of that is re-signing Cornelius Lucas, who has been around for the last couple of years during the Ron Rivera era. He gets a 2-year deal reported, and he's nice enough to join us now and give us his thoughts on coming back. Cornelius, congratulations. Welcome back, first of all, and I guess we'll start with this. Why was it important for you to come back to Washington where you've been the last couple of years?
I feel like I've built a home here. It feels like home. Really comfortable with the coaches. The coaches are comfortable with me. I like the guys on the team. Just a good fit.
When you started this process, I know you talked to other teams, as all free agents do. Were you absolutely, I guess, focused on maybe the best deal for you or the best opportunity for you to play as many snaps? Like, what was your thought process when you first started, and then maybe how did that shift?
It was really set on, first and foremost, finding the best deal because we don't play the sport for free.
Sure.
And secondly, just being in a good position to showcase my ability. And when all the smoke cleared and everyone did everything they were going to do, Washington was My best bet.
How much did that? How much did them bringing you here 2 years ago? You started, you played a bunch of snaps, more than you got an opportunity to, in most years prior to coming here. How much did that kind of play in your mind as, if I can find the deal that I'm looking for, that I'm comfortable with, I want to stay here, like you said, home, and maybe reward some of that two-way loyalty?
Yeah, definitely. Like bouncing around, getting in new teams, having to prove yourself over and over again. People not really being sure about your ability. I feel like I've established that here. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to continue to build on that. So, yeah, it was much easier for me to make this transition back than to go somewhere else and have to redo everything I've done the last 2 years.
Right. How important has John Matsko been in your development in this phase of your career? Of course, you came here with experience, so it's not like you came here raw as a rookie or anything like that. But how important has that connection been for you?
He's been essential. He's basically molded me just a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? Taught me a few more things, a few more important things that I didn't have in my game before, and I appreciate him. I appreciate him for that.
When you look at the opportunity here, clearly you got Cosme, you got Leno. Leno doesn't miss any time, knock on whatever wood or whatever, but you played a ton at right tackle last year, whereas you played a lot more at left tackle in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Are you at a situation, clearly you're comfortable coming back here, but are you at a situation where you just focus on one position because that seemingly is where the opportunity is most, at least on paper, or do you just look at it as, hey, whatever happens, happens, and I can't control injuries and I got to be ready for everything?
Be ready for everything.
Yeah.
Be able to see around corners. Definitely coming in to compete to start. Yeah, that's that. If it's left or if it's right, you know what I'm saying? Life hands you lemons, what you gonna do?
And last year, if I'm remembering correct, and maybe I'm wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think you were, I think you had, you were out on the protocol list or whatever it was at the start of camp. If I'm remembering that right, did that really kind of set you back in terms of your ability to try and, win that right tackle spot out of the chute, or did that not really have a huge effect? What do you remember from all that?
I feel like it was terrible timing.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a kid that's been drafted pretty high coming in to do the same thing as you. But yeah, that was last year, man. I can't really cry over spoiled milk or the situation. I wish I could have got it back. I wish I could get it back. But we're here now.
I know some of the guys in the media session that just got done that were asked you about, like, no Sheriff, no Flowers. You guys feel with Leno back under an extension, you back under a new deal, Cosme in year 2, and Norwell, who I know you haven't met yet, that this offensive line will gel pretty quickly together, or would you say that's going to be a process?
I have no doubt that we're going to gel together. We take enough reps, enough walkthrough reps, enough time that by the time it's ready to go, by the time it's time, we're going to be ready to go.
Right. So I know they asked you this already, but I'll ask you for my audience, Commanders. When you hear Commanders, I'm a commander. I'm not a member of the Washington football team. And we know the old name. Like, what does that mean to you now that you've had a couple of months for it to settle in? Well, I feel like I've known this team under 3 different names. So it's taking a while. It's taking a while for me to process out the old names and process in the new name. So yeah, it's growing on me. You know what you got to do, Cornelius?
People,
you got to take command. That's what you got to do.
When I mention it to people, like when I'm back at home, they're like, "Who are the Commanders?" I'm like, "The Washington football team." They're like, "The Washington football team," and then I say the old name. They're like, "Oh, that's what you're talking about." Okay, but that's usually like the process I have to go through when I'm back at home.
Hey man, here's I've been around here for, I don't know, 14 years or whatever it is. And I mean, I've covered now 3 different. So I just say whatever they want to call themselves, they call themselves. It's just a name. You're here to play football. We're here to talk about it, analyze it, cover it, whatever. I mean, sometimes we say in the media foolish things. I try not to be overly foolish, but it's just about winning football games, right? I mean, that's really all that matters. Speaking of winning football games, I mean, like Taylor Heineke did a heck of a job last year. We all know, how gutty and gritty he is, but the team made an acquisition of Carson Wentz. When you heard, hey, Carson Wentz is going to the Commanders, what was your reaction?
I was glad to have him. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Glad for him to become another piece to our puzzle. Hopefully we can all gel together and make a good run.
Once you get the deal that you're looking for, does something like that trigger in your mind to say, hey, you know what? That guy could, he was a former number 2 overall pick. He was almost a league MVP before he ripped up his knee. Mm-hmm. Is that something that is exciting to a player? Like you think, hey, no offense to Taylor and what he did the best he could, but that's a guy that could potentially elevate us back to a division title, back to something potentially more.
Yeah, definitely. And redemption is a different kind of motivation. You know what I'm saying? When you strike out and things don't go as planned and you get another crack at it, for me at least, I feel like I'm coming back. I want to come back even harder. So I'm excited to see what he has in store for us.
All right, last thing, and then we'll let you out of here. We appreciate your time, Cornelius Lucas, with us as he re-signs with the Washington Commanders. What message would you have to the fan base moving forward? I mean, of course, there's moving parts, and you can only do your job and concentrate on your job. But, the fan base is kind of, it's endured some tough times. Let's put it that way. What message would you have to them?
I would say that Big Luke love y'all and stay with us, man.
I mean, like, does Big Luke love the media?
Yeah, Big Luke loves the media too, man. Big Luke loves the fans. Big Luke loves the media. Big Luke loves his team. You know what I'm saying? Big Luke got a lot of love for a lot of people.
I'm only teasing about that. I wouldn't love the media if I were you guys either. Well, listen, congratulations. Thanks so much for doing this. Appreciate it. Welcome back. And you're a big part of this offensive line and therefore a big part of this team. So I know everybody's excited to have you. But again, congratulations and thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Commanders fans. So that's Cornelius Lucas. We appreciate him joining us and a good conversation there. So good to have him back in the fold. That's important because I think he's going to battle Sam Cosmi in training camp for the starting right tackle spot. Coming up next on the Locked On Commanders podcast, where in the world was Ron Rivera and what could it all mean? That's next. Locked On Commanders. Guys, Chris Russell here and David Harrison for our friends at Built Bar and Built Bar Puffs. Have you tried the Puffs? They're awesome, baby. They're ready for awesome, baby. Built Bars are always awesome, but the Built Bar Puffs are really cool. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. And guess what? Unlike regular marshmallows, they're healthy for you. And they're so tasty. I love the banana cream pie one. You can also get the coconut marshmallow. You can get the cinnamony, yummy churro flavor. So good. They're all healthy for you, not loaded with sugar and all that stuff that's not good for your body. Trust us. Built Bar Puffs are awesome. They taste great, and they're healthy for you, unlike your traditional cookie bar. And there is no protein-infused marshmallows, so get them now. As a matter of fact, get everything Built Bar makes because it's all great. You can get it at Built.com, including limited-time flavors that they put out. Oh, so good. Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. And use the promo code again, LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com.
Final segment here at the Locked On Commanders podcast, wrapping up the week. David Harrison and Chris Russell joining you. Find us on Twitter at DHarrison82, at Russellmania621, at LO Commanders. Chris, we had a Twitter follower say they don't like our Twitter handle, LO Commanders, because they always think it says LOL Commanders.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one.
Yeah, look, I asked him for a recommendation. He really didn't give me one. He kind of said, oh, that's a tough one. So if anybody out there wants to contribute a recommendation, I mean, we can change the Twitter handle, no problem. And no,
should
we're not going to change
LO underscore Commanders? Or,
yeah, I mean, it could be LO underscore Commander. It could be Locked On Commanders, to be honest with you, but I was trying to save you guys some characters.
Right,
tweet at us and tell us how hateful we are. So Speaking of things going on in the Washington Commanders world, totally not connected, but we're just going to pretend that it is. Ron Rivera, head coach of your Washington Commanders, was in Columbus and Cincinnati touring the state of Ohio, well, the lower half of the state of Ohio, middle and lower half, at the Ohio State and Cincinnati Bearcat Pro Days. Should we read anything into it, Chris? Anything that we're hearing coming from the Pro Days that should pique the interest of Commanders fans, especially the draft experts out there knocking out mock drafts every day?
Yeah, I think this is interesting because, again, Ron is doing his due diligence, right? There's nothing wrong with him being at pro days. We see all sorts of head coaches being at pro days. Sometimes we overreact to that. I'm trying not to overreact to this. I mean, we know Ohio State's a football factory. We know Cincinnati's a really good program, and they run a hell of a defense, and they've got some exciting offensive talent as well. What caught my eye, David, and I'm not sure if it means anything per se, but on Wednesday, Ron and Marty Herney were pictured talking to Chris Olave in the end zone of the practice facility in Columbus. Now, does that mean they like him over Garrett? I don't know. I mean, I like both of those guys. I think both of those guys could help the Washington Commanders. Could they go wide receiver at number 11? We know they could go. I don't know if that means anything to you, but I was more intrigued by what I saw on Thursday, which was at Cincinnati's pro day when Ron specifically was walking with linebacker Darian Beavers, who is really a strong side linebacker and a heck of an athlete. I mean, he's got size, athleticism, pass coverage, run stopping ability, explosive. He's got what you're looking for, but he's not really a Mike linebacker unless they're going to do that tango again and try and convert him. And it got me to think, could this team draft, especially early, a outside linebacker and really not address the Mike linebacker like everyone thinks they will immediately address? Your thoughts on that?
I mean, it really depends on their feelings on Cole Holcomb. I think we know we have a verdict on Jamin Davis as a potential Mike, and as of right now, anyway, it ain't gonna happen. And I mean, those things could improve and get better. Granted, so don't mail in Jamin's future quite yet, but it just doesn't look like it's a good natural fit for that position. We'll see how he does moving forward. Cole, look, he showed some leadership, he showed some guts, he showed some intensity on the field, and again, we're talking about a team that really, from a on-field execution standpoint, doesn't have kind of a clear-cut leader. Like, I know Chase is on all the posters and in the commercials, and he's the sexy face, and he's got a lot of energy. But when you look at the team on the field, you don't just kind of gravitate to Chase Young and say that's the leader of the team. And honestly, it's really hard to do on a defensive line, to be completely honest with you, because you get lost in the scrum so much. So guys like Aaron Donald, that's what makes them so special. But when you look at the potential of the team, if you see the raw athleticism and the traits that you need, that you feel like you need for your defense, I mean, coaches, look, call it ego, call it what you want, but coaches will believe if they see the right tools, that they will believe that they can make those tools work in the way that they need them to. So yeah, it could absolutely happen. As far as Coach Rivera talking to Olave and Marty, talking to Olave in the end zone, I don't know that it means that they like Olave more than Wilson. I think what it probably means is they kind of know what they have in Garrett Wilson, and they kind of know what to expect. So really, Wilson, for the most part, is wide receiver 1 on pretty much everybody's board. The chances that wide receiver 1 makes it to pick 11 usually is not very high. Now, it could happen in this draft, especially because of the trench heavy or the trench need heavy teams in front of Washington. And I think Atlanta is a really big spot to watch, because if Atlanta goes, say, quarterback over a wide receiver, then that's obviously going to push the group down. I think really it just shows you that there's interest in both guys, and maybe they could have Olave ranked ahead of a Traylon Burks or ahead of a Jamison Williams because of that ACL. So that might be the thing. But I think really at the end of the day, it shows you, I think, that wide receiver probably you can probably bet safely that wide receiver is a day one option for the Washington Commanders, and that Chris Olave is among the group that they're considering to potentially pick at number 11. Look, it could also mean they're considering a trade back to, say, number 20 with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think, is number 20. Maybe the Minnesota Vikings, actually, I think.
No. I think you're right. The Steelers, I think, are at 20.
Yeah, let's say one of these teams wants to move up to go get a Kenny Pickett. You know what I mean? And so Washington moves back from 11 to, say, 20. And that's another third-round pick. They just happen to be missing a third-round pick. So, things like that. And maybe Olave is there at 20 and Washington pulls the trigger. So it's, take a little bit from it. Don't take too much from it, because at the end of the day, they could also have been asking him about the quarterback, CJ Stroud, that was throwing him the football and doing some pre-scouting for 2023. So, I mean, there's just so many what ifs in there that just don't run away with it. Don't go buy a custom Olave jersey yet, is what I'm saying.
Big picture word, due diligence.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
how we should kind of consider it. It doesn't mean that they're going to pick them. Like you said, it doesn't mean that they like Olave over Garrett Wilson. Doesn't mean that they're going to pick a wide receiver.
Yeah.
It is absolutely under consideration.
Just retrace all the circles I just talked myself into trying to answer that question and realize that I left about a dozen or so more circles untraced.
What's wrong with you? We don't have time to answer that.
We definitely don't.
We'll try and answer that next week. What's wrong with both of us? It's called Commander Crazy. How about that?
Yeah, there you go.
All right, guys. That's going to do it for us for this particular episode of the Locked On Commanders podcast. And this week, thanks again for making LOC your first listen and watch of the day. Now make your second listen and watch the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with Ryan Tracy, former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker, as they bring the NFL draft to life each and every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects like the ones we were just talking about, and NFL front offices like the Washington Commanders. We will be back after the weekend with more episodes, more coverage, Mock Draft Monday, and everything in between coming back for you. Again, always remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. If you have a question or topic you want to get in, and we have plenty of time next week for voicemails, get them in 301-615-3577. That's 301-615-3577, or Locked On Washington Commanders at gmail.com. For David Harrison, it's that guy writing for the Commanders for SI.com's Fan Nation. I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst show on the Team 980 and the Audacy app. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, don't drive like a maniac, and thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.